I'm Adam Noonan. I'm a sales engineer here at Lenses, joined by the broader team as well. So we'll all be online to answer your questions in the chat, or feel free to raise a hand and chime in for saying anything that strikes a chord or you need to know more about. Today, we're talking about sourcing complex data from S3 and how we've designed our S3 connector to handle these workloads and work with this data, as well as some other features and lenses that help making working with these complex data structures and messages that much easier in Lenses. We do have a full schedule as well for these Lenses live sessions. So again, today we're covering sourcing complex data. Next week, we'll be talking about syncing your data to S3 to rehydrate the data lake for historic analytic workloads. And then December 21st, we'll be wrapping the year with bringing some holiday magic to your Kafka streams with stream processing with Lenses SQL. And we are planning the schedule for next year as well. So I believe there will be a poll in the chat. We're eager to hear more about some topics that you're eager to learn more about. So anything that you're working with or curious about today that we can maybe answer some questions, make things a little bit easier, yeah, feel free to chime in, and we're happy to oblige. And all of this is part of a larger initiative too, so that we're not providing just our Lenses software, but actually enabling customers and prospects and contributing back to the wider ecosystem as far as Kafka, stream processing, and Kafka connectors, just the whole ecosystem. So I'll let that poll run for a little bit longer. Again, I'm Adam Noonan. Joined with me today is Stefan, our Director of Engineering, Andrew, our CTO, Adamas, who's heading product, Matthias is a professional services, an all-around expert in Kafka, and our CEO, Guillaume, is on the line as well. So they'll keep me honest. If I say anything that isn't totally accurate, they're going to interrupt and keep us on course. So starting us off, we're talking about sourcing complex data from S3 and bringing that into Kafka. And I think it's apt to define complex data. So what are we talking about when we're referring to complex text data stored in S3? So if anybody has any ideas or conceptions, things you're working with today that you might use to define complex text data, we'd love to hear what that means to you and your organization. And if you've had any nightmares of working with, oh my gosh, this giant XML file, this EDI data, how am I going to work with this and move off of this legacy monolith application architecture? We'd love to hear about it and the challenges you encounter. See a hand raise, Shoaib, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Well, like we were using this Kafka S3, and then basically we were pulling data into the AWS Redshift. So what we were doing it is with the help of a CDC, we were pulling the data into the S3 bucket, and then with the AWS Spectrum Redshift, we were running like high latency queries. So this was like a good use case where we were moving the data from our SQL database to S3 and bringing it in. It was like quite smooth, and it was like quite proven example which we are using. So yeah, this is just one use case which can come to my mind.
Totally. Yeah, so CDC from a relational database, pull that change data capture into Kafka, and then you sync to S3 to use for queries in Redshift.
Yeah. So Redshift will have a hook to the S3 bucket, and then like from there you can run the queries. Basically, we were using Looker over the S3, like AWS Redshift, where like all our analytics queries we can run it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So separating that query and analytical workloads away from the actual relational database.
Yeah.
Object store. Very cool. See a couple of other hands raised. V, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, so this is Prasad. So I'm just curious, I'm coming from first time to this lens. I heard I've attended Current this year with Kafka Confluent team. So I'm just curious because some of the use cases where we are working on, where we bring in a lot of data from our field sites, from our SAP systems. So it would be a mix of video streaming data, mix of unstructured data, all these different set of data. And one of the biggest challenges, at least for the business standpoint, was more, hey, how do I kind of correlate the data between different data sets coming in? Is it, I know probably it's not make sense in this call, or probably we can take it offline, whatever you want. But I was curious, like, where does Lens can fit in to the overall landscape where I'm streaming the data, probably I'm batching the data, but my data lands in Kafka. How do I make sure I can make sense of the data before I start doing my analytical or processing or doing my AI models, right? How do I can use Lens as a software in between? That's what I was curious to know.
Yeah, I think there's a few areas where Lenses can help out with. Is one, our Lenses SQL Studio for asking ad hoc questions. So if you're getting familiar with a data set as it is in Kafka without syncing to an external source, you can do that all within Lenses. We also have metadata and sort of data cataloging features as well. So when it comes time to collaborate with another team, you can tag that, add a description, quite a few features I think that would be useful in that use case. And feel free to contact us on community Slack to find out more and stick around to see the demo as well.
Thank you.
Harry.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I see your hand raised. Would you like to chime in, sir? That's all right. Go ahead and keep that hand raised and feel free to chime in when you feel ready. So we'll go ahead and define complex data for this use case right now. So when we say complex data, the first thing that comes to my mind, especially in S3, is a really large file size. So we've got a lot of information into a text file with multiple events into a single file. Typically going to have a complex schema or complicated structure. So you can have multiple layers of nested objects with a wide variety of data types, usually includes like a headers field, and usually has a large individual message size. So we've got a large file with many large events in it with a complex schema or message structure within that file, all of which makes working with this data for analysis, inputting into another source system, a big headache. And our good job and what we've aimed to do is make this as easy as possible. So we have an example here, which is an XML structure, which is what we'll be working with today in our demonstration. And it can get complicated quick. It doesn't have to be XML data too. You could have really weird delineated just text files. So we've got an example here, maybe even aviation data. So each of these would be events and they're just separated by a new line or an empty line space. And your goal is to get this information into Kafka for integrations with external source systems or just streaming that into your end sync and goal there. So we want to make working with and consuming these text files as easy as possible. All right, and so scenarios where we would be working with complex data, what sort of applications come to mind when we talk about these large text files, and what sort of infrastructures and systems do you have in mind when we're talking about complex text data? Any suggestions or complaints about legacy systems you've used that work with large text files and complex schemas and structures? And if not, we can share what we've seen in our experience and usually what comes to mind when we're talking about these workloads. So where does complex data come from? In our experience, three big sources, but obviously this is something that could be a number of applications that are producing these data structures. One thing that comes to mind is legacy applications. So mainframe systems, electronic data interchanges, they typically use an XML structure or at least a complicated text structure, which can be unstructured in an object store or multi-line events from a legacy system like mainframe. What also comes to mind is SOA applications. So SOAP messages from your JMS messaging system, maybe a TIBCO system that you're looking to pull that data into Kafka for a modernization task. So you're pulling it into event streaming platform, which you're then going to actually address with a microservice instead of that legacy monolith. So that intermediary step. Another thing that comes to mind too is HTML data. So if you're scraping the web, pulling in HTML files, and maybe feeding your new AI or LLM system, and you're providing training data for that, you're going to be working with a lot of HTML files which follow the XML format. And all of this will be relying on our Lenses S3 source and sync connectors. These are developed solely in-house. They're made available under the Apache 2 open source license. So you're feel free to take it, install it in your Kafka Connect, mess around with the actual code, make pull requests and contribute to the open source project there. The advantage is that it is open source. You can use that in your environment. You can see the full code base. But we do offer enterprise support as well. So we have customers that are looking for the flexibility with an open source connector, but they're needing and requiring that enterprise support with reduced SLAs for that open source connector. So they're not having to pay for licensed software, but they do get the added benefit of support for production workloads. They can always open a ticket, tap on our shoulders, and we'll help them address their issue. So all the advantages and flexibility of open source, along with the enterprise grade support, is what we offer at Lenses. Additionally, the integration into our actual developer experience platform for an overall enhanced developer experience. Some example architectural patterns that we'll talk about today when working with complex data is sourcing XML data from a monolith via S3 to feed into microservices. So the example we'll walk through today is we have a TIBCO system. It's writing XML data to your object store. You can then pull that and source that into Kafka for consumption into each of your event-driven microservices. And again, too, we've seen similar workloads running where you're scraping data, you have massive amounts of HTML data that then you're looking to source into Kafka, apply some sort of stream processing. So this could be even tokenizing all of that data and then vectorizing those tokens to store into your vector DB for your LLM application. So all very similar and interrelated architectural patterns. And with that, I'll hand it over to Guillaume, who's going to walk us through a demonstration today of this feature and experience within Lenses.
Yep. Hi, everyone. So effectively, we're really going to focus for this demo on this pattern here, where let's assume that we've got some sort of JMS messaging system, such as TIBCO, dumping these XML files, which effectively are the SOAP messages of the communication between your different applications connected to your SOA architecture. So it's quite a common format. But the data I'm going to show you is some radar data of the movement of aircraft at a particular airport. So it's been anonymized. You're not going to be able to see which airport it's from, but it's real data. And that's data sitting in an S3 bucket. We're going to source it into Kafka. And the idea is to source it in a way that can then be consumed by your downstream microservices. And those microservices are designed to be your modern next generation applications. So let's jump into the demo. Let me share my screen here. Now, maybe I start by saying, so the environment I'm using is if anyone's familiar with Lenses, we've got this Lenses, what we call box, or it's a Kafka Docker. It's a free instance of Lenses and a self-contained single broker Kafka instance. So it's a great environment if you're doing demos internally or you're developing locally or just testing something. It's a great environment to be working from. So you can just go to lenses.io/Apache Kafka Docker. So that's my environment here. I'm guessing most people on the call are fairly familiar with Lenses. This is our topology view. It shows our pipelines that we currently have in our environment, in our Kafka environment. And what we're going to do is create a brand new pipeline. So we're going to go and the pipeline is going to start with a connector. So what we're seeing here is, you can imagine that Lenses as the developer experience for your Kafka environment. So I'm going to go ahead, rather than using a command line and lots of different tools, I'm going to deploy my Kafka connector from within this developer experience environment. And I've got a number of different connectors I can select from. We're really interested in the S3 connectors. There we go. Select that. And this is where I'm going to put in the configuration of the source of the data I want to bring into Kafka. And let me just paste in rather than us losing time. So we're using the S3 source connector, and this is our KCQL. This is our Kafka Connect query language, and it's a syntax that allows us to define how to map the data from source to target. In this case, the source is S3 and the target is Kafka. And it's a kind of SQL-esque syntax, and it's saying insert into the topic radar that I've got in my Kafka, and then select all the fields from a bucket called position reports and a prefix radar. So I've got a folder called radar within a bucket called ship positions, and then some additional properties. And these are particularly important because here we're going to say this data, it's going to be XML data, and we're going to define the start and event by a tag known as SMCS flight object, and it's going to end with the closing object of that. Okay, so the first thing we need to do though is we need to make sure there's a topic called radar. So I'm going to go to our explore screen and firstly just create an empty topic called radar. There we go. Let's go into it. And you can see there's no data in there whatsoever right now. That makes sense. So let's go back to our configuration and let me just show you what this data looks like. So here's my bucket, and my bucket has a file called radar XML. Now, in most cases, you would have hundreds, if not thousands, of files. And this data looks a little bit like, in fact, so exactly like this. It's a big file. And if you remember, what we're delimiting on is this object here. Sorry, we're delimiting on aircraft movement, I believe it is. So we've got lots of aircraft movements, which all represent different discrete events that we want in Kafka. And that's what's going to be consumed by our downstream applications. So let me go back to my configuration. And I now need to paste in the authorization so I can connect to my bucket. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy that. So it takes a few seconds. This is what's happening behind the scenes is we're deploying the connector on your existing Kafka Connect infrastructure. If I go to my topology and I find my radar topic, I can now see I've got my radar S3 connector that's going to send data to a topic called radar. Let's just go back to the connectors. So it's running, it's got one task, everything looks good. Yep, everything looks healthy. And we can see it's already processed 5 events. So there isn't a lot of data in this environment, but that's okay. Let's go to our explore page and search my data. And by the way, Prasad, this is our data catalog. This allows you to understand what data you have in your Kafka environment. And I can see that I've got this topic radar. If I go into it, let's have a look, see what it looks like. Yeah, immediately we see these events. This is one event with all these movements of aircraft. Pretty good, right? So now that can start to be consumed by my downstream applications. And I'm just going to go a little bit quicker here. All right, let's move that. What we might want to do is use SQL to query that data. And what's great about SQL is if you see this data here, it's got 3 different events in one event. And I want to explode that. So I'm going to use a function called lateral aircraft movement as movement. And what this is going to do is explode the array. So now, let's just do movement star. Rather than having one event with an array of 3, I've got an individual event for each element in the array. And that's going to be much easier for my downstream applications to be able to process. Any questions on that? Let's just see. I'm just a little bit conscious of time. We've got 4 minutes. I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions. It's pretty neat, right? It's really focused on a developer experience for hundreds, if not thousands of engineers within your organization. So when you're building these applications, these SQL processing applications, we provide the full developer experience. So you might have MSK and Confluent Cloud and Confluent on-prem platform and some Red Panda. And the experience from a data operations perspective is exactly the same. Anyone with any questions?
And if you have any after the call, again, feel free to ask us on community Slack. You can interface with the whole team there. Guillaume gave a fantastic demonstration of how easy it is to source complex data from S3 much easier than paying for a licensed connector, which is very costly, or developing your own custom application, which is very, very lengthy, which is its own sort of cost. If you're looking to find out more about how to process this data with SQL, I'm leading a hands-on workshop tomorrow. It'll be an hour long. You guys can sign into our demo environment. We'll go over some quick and easy transformations that we can do with lenses using a few lines of SQL to save you time and money, reducing the time to market and value, as well as your actual Kafka storage costs. Shoaib, you have a question. Maybe we can get to that now.
Yeah, sorry, Adam. Adam, I have one question. In the start, like you said that the connectors, what lenses are building is open source, correct?
Correct.
And let's say an example, if I'm using the Confluent Kafka, and if I want to use your connectors, I can use it, correct?
Absolutely. You could upload your connector to the Kafka Connect cluster and it will all function perfect.
Perfectly. Okay, fine.
And we have quite a few connectors available today and a wide number of connectors that we are working on as well. So happy to partner with you for any custom development that your teams might need for Kafka Connect. And again, always offering enterprise support as well for any production workloads.
Okay.
Yep. And again, session tomorrow will be on processing this complex data with a few lines of SQL, significantly reducing your time to value, even for a seasoned developer, and really assist with troubleshooting instead of a full Kafka Streams app or Spark job for processing that data. It's just a few lines of SQL is very intuitive. Again, please join our community, ask us questions there, and propose any changes or suggestions of product, things we can improve. We're always looking to get better and address your needs when it comes to event-driven architecture and data streaming. Next week, again, we'll be syncing data into S3 for consumption into a data lake and showing you what all is possible there and all the nice features Lenses provides to make this as easy as possible for your teams and organizations. So definitely tune in same time next week, and we'll cover that as well. And with that, thank you so much for attending. If there's any last remaining questions we can address, the team will be on and we can handle those now.